Welcome to Demand and Disrupt the Disability Podcast. Here, we will learn to advocate for ourselves and each other. This podcast is supported with funds from the Advocado Press, based in Louisville, Kentucky. Dr. Kara Ayers is an associate professor at Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center and the University of Cincinnati Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. She's a researcher who studies parenting with a disability and healthcare inequities faced by people with disabilities. She is also the mother of 3 children, ages 5, 12, and 17. Welcome, Dr. Ayers. Kara, tell me a little about yourself. You are chapter, is it 3 or 4 in the book?
Oh gosh, I do not remember.
You're higher than me. I'm 23, so I know you're higher than me.
I wish we had our editor, Dave. He knows this all by heart.
He does.
Yeah.
So tell me about yourself, Kara.
Yeah. Well, I had the opportunity to share my most cherished role in the book as mother. I'm a mom to 3 kids, a 15-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 5-year-old. So back to school season for us right now is busy and exciting. I am a proud disabled woman, also the wife to a disabled man. So we have a lot of disability happening in our house, which to us is a positive part of life and a part of our identity. I have osteogenesis imperfecta, which is a genetic condition that causes my bones to break more easily than most. And it's also a type of dwarfism. So I'm a little person who uses a wheelchair for mobility. And let's see, professionally, I am a psychologist and I research. So I don't see patients in my current role. Instead, I do research and training, teaching about a number of different disability issues, including parenting with a disability. So I have what I consider to be the really good fortune to both, live that role and then also study it to hopefully help more people understand that we're out there and we're leading families like everybody else.
Oh, that's interesting that you mentioned you're a proud disabled person. Now, I know there's a lot of, not really controversy, but a lot of head scratching about the whole disability pride issue. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I think that everyone kind of comes to their own, and I don't even know if comes to a point because I think it's always evolving, but I think, identity is a personal matter that is often unique for each individual. And I didn't always identify with pride in my disability. I think that when I started to learn that other people did, it was surprising to me because I had more endorsed what I feel like most of society tries to teach us about disability is that it's something to overcome. And so I, somewhere in my college years, had a shift of perspective, largely by being around other people with disabilities, to really think about how, well, what if the things that I achieve aren't despite disability, but are influenced by the fact that I have these experiences and, the lessons that I've learned from not only being who I am, but also I have the good fortune to be connected to our community, which is, I think, really cool.
I agree. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You came to it so much earlier than I did. You said in college. I very, very recently came to that. I'm still struggling with this on my own as I, listen to people talk about disability pride. So, but I am proud of the people I know, and the community. It's a wonderful group of people willing to help. And well, just in general, they're just great people.
Pride means like we have to love every part of our disability itself. I mean, there are parts of my disability, I'm not sure about yours, but mine, brings pain, literal pain sometimes.
Yes.
So it's like,
exactly.
I don't have to love that. So yeah, I do walk, I try to figure out a balance between, I don't want to be all kind of overly saccharine, like there's nothing challenging about it, but I do feel like you can have pride in the midst of that.
Yep. I do agree. So now tell me about your parenting journey.
My husband and I both knew we wanted to be parents. We sought some advice from experts, largely from our disability OI has conferences where medical experts largely volunteer their time and will kind of answer questions to folks. Of course, it's all kind of like informal a bit, but it's a rare opportunity to talk to people who specialize in your rare condition. So we had gotten information that way about, things like genetically, what would be the odds of us having a healthy pregnancy, or what would be the odds of us passing on our OI or not. So we felt like we needed to educate ourselves about all of those things, and also have a lot of, heart-to-heart discussions with each other and also with ourselves. And kind of at the culmination of all that, we pursued pregnancy with our first, and was fortunate to have a healthy pregnancy with her in 2010. She's my 12-year-old, and she was born without OI, which we feel is just exactly who she was meant to be, just as who we believe we are meant to be, who we are. So it's a little tricky, because I think, some people feel as though it was like she was lucky, or we're lucky. I feel like luck has kind of strange connotations, because I don't feel like that I was unlucky to be born this way. So, it's just tricky. But so then we knew, yeah.
Yeah. Same.
So then 4 years later, we knew, or about actually 3 years later, we knew we wanted to give her a sibling, but we weren't sure if that was another pregnancy for me or not. And so we pursued adoption, and we brought home our son. He was adopted at age 7 from China, and he has achondroplasia, which is a different form of dwarfism from ours, but a disability that we felt is very similar to ours in many ways. So we were familiar with like medical aspects as well as social aspects that we could help him in navigating life. And so he was the oldest. So my 12-year-old has the interesting experience of being the younger, and then now the middle, because in 2017 I had our youngest, who's 5, and who's now unexpectedly yelling for me, but
it happens.
So yeah, so she was our last, and now I definitely know the saying of my heart is full. So but
overflowing.
So I had another healthy pregnancy with her. She also, interestingly, was born without OI. So genetically, our odds were 75% that our child would have OI. The only piece of that 75% that we were most concerned about is 25% is that the baby would inherit both of our genetic mutations, which would be double dominance, which there's really not much literature related to our disability. But if we look at the research related to achondroplasia, which there's more, it's typically really not good outcomes. Usually the babies don't survive pregnancy with a double mutation. So that was the outcome that we were most afraid of. And with every pregnancy we would ever have, we would have a 1 in 4 chance of that happening. And then on the flip side, we have the 1 in 4 chance that they would inherit neither of our mutated genes. And that is what happened 2 times for us with our girls. So we have 2 girls without disabilities, and then our son, the oldest, has a disability. So
yeah, those genetic questions are hard. My disability is genetic also, and there was a 50% chance, and we have 2 children. One of them has it, and one of them does not. And I am glad that that you had the choice to plan our families as we wanted them.
Exactly.
As we envisioned our families being, and that we were able to make the choices that were right for us. I'm very glad that we had that. So, and I know in part of your work, you lead the Disabled Parenting Project Facebook group. Did I get that right?
Yes, exactly.
Excellent. So tell me about that.
Yeah, so this originated from some research I conducted several years ago involving interviews with parents with disabilities. And then we realized from that there was a real want and need for cross-disability peer support. And at that time, this was 2010, where Facebook groups were not quite as active and common as they are now. So we originally were kind of a website and a blog and connecting people. I think in the early days, we were even a forum. But then we moved on to a Facebook group, which is technically closed. So we try to create it as safe a space as you can on a Facebook group, meaning that everyone in the group says the question, yes to the question that they are either a parent with a disability or a person with a disability who is thinking about parenting. So kind of figuring it out and getting some of that information. And so, yeah, there's all kinds of questions that are brought there, ranging from, what are the best strollers for a wheelchair user, to a lot of grappling with, the doubt and the stigma that parents with disabilities face. So there's some opportunity to have those discussions with other people who understand too.
And it's for people with all kinds of disabilities. Is that correct?
It is. Yes. It's cross disability. That's been kind of a feature of my work. I feel that we largely share more in common than have, distinctions by diagnosis. Of course, when we need our medical care, we, we need to go to specialists that know our particular diagnosis. But outside of that, I feel like many of our experiences are more similar than different. So,
So one thing I want to ask is, tell me one of the ways in which you have had to demand. The title of this podcast is Demand and Disrupt. So tell me one of the ways in which you've had to demand equality for yourself as a parent or for your children.
I love that title.
Thank you.
Cool.
We brainstormed a long time.
Yeah, love it. Well, it's perfect for parenting too, I feel like. Oh my gosh. Demands on yourself and your body. Yeah. And then also the demands that they make of us, those we're still in that era with my 5-year-old, working on let's be less demanding when we have our needs. But yeah, I mean, really in a lot of ways, I think the act of pursuing parenting both ways that I have, whether it be, through biologically through a pregnancy or through adoption, has in some ways felt at different points like a demand and disruption. And that I think you have to be confident enough, or at least put on the face of confidence, that you have to keep going, even when other people are, saying like, well, I don't know, have you thought about this or have you thought about that? And recognizing that, at least for me, no, I hadn't thought of everything, but I had done a lot of thinking. And especially I think in thinking about adoption, where I guess there was a little bit more even playing field, in that all parents have to go through a home study process and kind of demonstrate their qualifications as parents. But we had that additional step to kind of demonstrate qualifications as disabled parents, and also doing that with China, the government, and their perceptions of disability. So there is like this demand and disruption. And I think that it's even hard for me to say like, oh, was I demanding? Because I don't know, culturally, I don't think I am a very demanding person if you meet me and know me, but definitely disruptive. And I guess I go about my demands in different ways. I make my case, and I know that the end result is what's most important. And that was definitely true for all three of my kids. So
yeah, I think having children in any way is an act of love and an act of hope. And I feel like that is an act of resistance right now, just to bring that love and hope into the world. So did you face any barriers because of the disabilities in terms of adopting a child from China?
We were relatively fortunate in that I think now this is a situation where I will say, luck may come in, because I don't think that it's like I prepared myself well enough that I just averted all the questions. Although I did try to do like a ton of research and ask questions, and I had a lot of friends who one parent of the couple had a disability. And so I tried to garner information about, okay, what questions did you face, and I knew we were going to have kind of double that issue. And our agency was not aware of another couple where both parents were in a wheelchair that China had approved for adoption. But what we did try to do was to really make the case that we understood his disability really well, because we were like him in many ways. And I think that worked out to our favor. So, I mean, our largest barriers were probably in traveling to China. And, we took my in-laws with us, and because we knew that we could face, accessibility barriers like we'd never seen before, and
Oh,
we
yeah.
would
Yeah.
still have to do whatever it was to make sure we got all the paperwork done all across China, to get him adopted. So we knew we couldn't be like, well, we can't, at one point there was a building that, we needed to sign papers on the 5th floor and there was no elevator. And, whereas in the
Wow.
United States, we could kind of say, you have to bring it down to us, or I don't know. We
Hmm.
felt like we had, the minute you leave US soil, I feel like as a disabled person, I definitely feel as though I leave a lot behind. You
Really?
know?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And it's not perfect. Obviously, the ADA is not what I wish it was, but
Right.
having nothing like that in a foreign country has probably, the few times that I've traveled internationally, has made me very nervous.
I would
But
be nervous. I've never traveled out of the country, but it would make me nervous. I hate traveling. I told my husband I don't want to go any further than the mailbox. That's as far as I'm going.
I've kind of gotten that way with COVID. Like I definitely don't
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
as much as I used to.
Exactly. Exactly. So wonderful. Well, are there any differences in terms of just parenting with your particular disability from the biological standpoint versus the adoption? I
Yeah.
have a friend who adopted, and she said adoption is easy because you haven't just given birth when you
Mhm.
take care of the child.
Yeah. Yeah, that was nice. It was funny because we were really hit by jet lag when we brought him home, but he has always just been just a force of energy that we were like, how is he not jet lagged? Because we were so tired, but he was like springing up, at the crack of dawn. And at that time when we brought him home, his sister was 4. So we had a 4 and a 7-year-old, and they were like, finally together, and just 2 little balls of energy. But yeah, it was definitely better than having to recover from my disability. I have to have a C-section, and it's very
Uh-huh.
planned. And
Yes.
um,
Mine was
so
also, yeah.
yeah, so it
Hmm.
it was better in that sense. Yeah, I think in some ways though, with adoption brings it still to our, still brings a lot of mysteries, and some of those are, you know, positive, and some of those are really hard. And so I think that part is one that a lot of people don't necessarily think about. At least that's been our experience. Definitely, you know, both a beautiful and a heartbreaking experience.
Hmm.
I think it's always, there's just so much loss wrapped up in our gains and his gains as well. But yeah, I just think but again, in similar ways that I'm just so fortunate to have connections to the disability community, I'm grateful, that he opened the doors that I have connections to China. I never would have thought that when I was a kid growing up in Kentucky. you know.
Right.
So
Yes,
it's
that's true.
pretty cool. I
Mhm.
actually, before I knew that pregnancy was possible for me, I always thought that adoption would be the only route to parenthood for me. But even after I, had a healthy pregnancy, I really never viewed adoption as a path, because pregnancy wasn't one. Like, I didn't view it as a kind of second best option.
Right,
So I
right, right.
still very much wanted to look into that, and thankfully
Mhm.
it worked out for us. The world changes so rapidly that a few years after we adopted Eli, China pretty radically changed their rules, and I'm not sure that we would be approved to adopt again. I'm not sure we would get through like the initial stages. There's some wording there that says that if you have any impairments to any of your limbs, which we have impairments to all of our limbs. So
Yeah, yeah. Huh.
yeah, so it's hard
What
for me.
prompted
Yeah.
what prompted that? What prompted that change? Do you know? Or
There's yeah, there's like landmines of political stuff with adoption in international countries, and there had been some issues of disruptions, meaning that United States couples or parents would adopt a child and then disrupt once they got back home, and China was pretty unhappy about that. So that's what I've heard. I don't
hmm.
know. So they kind of tried to make more stringent rules. They no longer allowed families to adopt 2 children at once. So there were several other rules. It wasn't just the disability kind of
Hmm.
factor, but it does. hurt my heart because when other young people come to me who have OI and want to know about our adoption journey, I wish I could feel more confident to tell them, that they could do this too, or I just don't know, it's so hard.
Yeah.
You can't predict China's system. Can't really
You
predict
can't.
ours either, but
No, the vagaries of geopolitics.
right.
You can
Exactly.
never be sure, but maybe they'll change it back,
Yeah, I hope so. And you got to try. You really don't know until you go down the road a bit. So
yeah, I can see how it would be
want to.
heartbreaking
Yeah.
to have your heart set on doing that and then realize because of this, I can't do it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, Kara, thank you so much. I appreciate you talking with me.
Yeah, this was great.
And congratulations on your wonderful family.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kara, for talking with us. And I'll have links to Kara's work in the show notes. And you can follow her work on Twitter and her home life on Instagram. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye. Thanks to Chris Ankin for music. Thanks to Joe Hodge for technical support. If you have questions or comments, send them to demandanddisrupt@gmail.com. If you like the podcast, please consider leaving a review. If you really like the podcast, go ahead and subscribe and tell others about us. Until next time, thanks for listening.